Article 12. National Economy and Patrimony. Section 1. The goals of the national economy are a more equitable distribution of opportunities, income, and wealth, a sustained increase in the amount of goods and services produced by the nation for the benefit of the people, and an expanding productivity, as the key to raising the quality of life for all, especially the underprivileged. The state shall promote industrialization, and full employment, based on sound agricultural development and agrarian reform, through industries that make full and efficient use of human and natural resources, and which are competitive in both domestic and foreign markets. However, the state shall protect Filipino enterprises against unfair foreign competition and trade practices. In the pursuit of these goals, all sectors of the economy, and all regions of the country, shall be given optimum opportunity to develop. Private enterprises, including corporations, cooperatives, and similar collective organizations, shall be encouraged to broaden the base of their ownership. Section 2. All lands of the public domain, waters, minerals, coal, petroleum, and other mineral oils, all sources of potential energy, fisheries, forest or timber, wildlife, flora and fauna, and other natural resources, are owned by the state. With the exception of agricultural lands, all other natural resources shall not be alienated. The exploration, development, and utilization of natural resources, shall be under the full control, and supervision of the state. The state may directly undertake such activities, or it may enter into co-production, joint venture, or production sharing agreements with Filipino citizens, or corporations or associations at least 60% of whose capital is owned by such citizens. Such agreements may be for a period not exceeding 25 years, renewable for not more than 25 years, and under such terms and conditions as may be provided by law. In cases of water rights for irrigation, water supply, fisheries, or industrial uses other than the development of water power, beneficial use may be the measure and limit of the grant. The state shall protect the nation's marine wealth. In its archipelagic waters, territorial sea, and exclusive economic zone, and reserve its use and enjoyment exclusively to Filipino citizens. The Congress may by law, allow small-scale utilization of natural resources by Filipino citizens, as well as cooperative fish farming, with priority to subsistence fishermen and fish workers in rivers, lakes, bays, and lagoons. The President may enter into agreements, with foreign-owned corporations, involving either technical or financial assistance for large-scale exploration, development, and utilization of minerals, petroleum, and other mineral oils according to the general terms and conditions provided by law, based on real contributions to the economic growth and general welfare of the country. In such agreements, the state shall promote the development and use of local scientific and technical resources. The President shall notify the Congress of every contract entered into, in accordance with this provision, within 30 days from its execution. Section 3. Lands of the public domain are classified into agricultural, forest or timber, mineral lands, and national parks. Agricultural lands of the public domain may be further classified by law, according to the uses which they may be devoted. Alienable lands of the public domain shall be limited to agricultural lands. Private corporations or associations may not hold such alienable lands of the public domain except by lease, for a period not exceeding 25 years, renewable for not more than 25 years, and not to exceed 1,000 hectares in area. Citizens of the Philippines may lease not more than 500 hectares, or acquire not more than 12 hectares thereof by purchase, homestead, or grant. Taking into account the requirements of conservation, ecology, and development, and subject to the requirements of agrarian reform, the Congress shall determine, by law, the size of lands of the public domain, which may be acquired, developed, held, or leased and the conditions therefor. Section 4. The Congress shall, as soon as possible, determine by law the specific limits of forest lands and national parks, marking clearly their boundaries on the ground. Thereafter, such forest lands and national parks shall be conserved, and may not be increased nor diminished, except by law. The Congress shall provide, for such period as it may determine, measures to prohibit logging in endangered forests and watershed areas. Section 5. The state, subject to the provisions of this Constitution, and national development policies and programs, shall protect the rights of indigenous cultural communities to their ancestral lands, to ensure their economic, social, and cultural well-being. The Congress may provide for the applicability of customary laws, governing property rights or relations, in determining the ownership and extent of ancestral domain. Section 6. The use of property bears a social function, and all economic agents shall contribute to the common good. Individuals and private groups, including corporations, cooperatives, and similar collective organizations, shall have the right to own, establish, and operate economic enterprises, subject to the duty of the state to promote distributive justice, and to intervene when the common good so demands. Section 7. Save in cases of hereditary succession, no private lands shall be transferred or conveyed except to individuals, corporations, or associations qualified to acquire or hold lands of the public domain. Section 8. Notwithstanding the provisions of Section 7 of this article, a natural-born citizen of the Philippines, who has lost his Philippine citizenship may be a transferee of private lands, subject to limitations provided by law. Section 9. The Congress may establish an independent economic and planning agency, headed by the President, which shall, after consultations with the appropriate public agencies, various private sectors, and local government units, recommend to Congress, and implement continuing integrated and coordinated programs and policies for national development. Until the Congress provides otherwise, the National Economic and Development Authority shall function as the independent planning agency of the government. Section 10. The Congress shall, upon recommendation of the Economic and Planning Agency, when the national interest dictates, reserve to citizens of the Philippines, or to corporations or associations at least 60% of whose capital is owned by such citizens, or such higher percentage as Congress may prescribe, certain areas of investments. The Congress shall enact measures that will encourage the formation and operation of enterprises whose capital is wholly owned by Filipinos. In the grant of rights, privileges, and concessions covering the national economy and patrimony, the state shall give preference to qualified Filipinos. The state shall regulate, and exercise authority over foreign investments, within its national jurisdiction, and in accordance with its national goals and priorities. Section 11. No franchise, certificate, or any other form of authorization for the operation of a public utility, shall be granted, except to citizens of the Philippines, or to corporations or associations organized under the laws of the Philippines at least 60% of whose capital is owned by such citizens, nor shall such franchise, certificate, or authorization be exclusive in character, or, for a longer period than 50 years. Neither shall any such franchise or right be granted, except under the condition that it shall be subject to amendment, alteration, or repeal by the Congress, when the common good so requires. The state shall encourage equity participation in public utilities by the general public. The participation of foreign investors in the governing body of any public utility enterprise shall be limited to their proportionate share in its capital, and all the executive and managing officers of such corporation or association must be citizens of the Philippines. Section 12. The state shall promote the preferential use of Filipino labor, domestic materials, and locally produced goods, and adopt measures that help make them competitive. Section 13. The state shall pursue a trade policy that serves the general welfare, and utilizes all forms and arrangements of exchange, on the basis of equality and reciprocity. Section 14. The sustained development of a reservoir of national talents, consisting of Filipino scientists, entrepreneurs, professionals, managers, high-level technical manpower, and skilled workers and craftsmen in all fields, shall be promoted by the state. The state shall encourage appropriate technology and regulate its transfer for the national benefit. The practice of all professions in the Philippines shall be limited to Filipino citizens, save in cases prescribed by law. Section 15. The Congress shall create an agency to promote the viability and growth of cooperatives, as instruments for social justice and economic development. Section 16. The Congress shall not, except by general law, provide for the formation, organization, or regulation of private corporations. Government-owned or controlled corporations may be created or established by special charters, in the interest of the common good, and subject to the test of economic viability. Section 17. In times of national emergency, when the public interest so requires, the state may, during the emergency and under reasonable terms prescribed by it, temporarily take over, or direct the operation of any privately owned public utility or business affected with public interest. Section 18. The state may, in the interest of national welfare or defense, establish and operate vital industries, and upon payment of just compensation, transfer to public ownership, utilities and other private enterprises, to be operated by the government. Section 19. The state shall regulate or prohibit monopolies, when the public interest so requires. No combinations in restraint of trade or unfair competition shall be allowed. Section 20. The Congress shall establish an independent central monetary authority, the members of whose governing board must be natural-born Filipino citizens, of known probity, integrity, and patriotism, the majority of whom shall come from the private sector. They shall also be subject to such other qualifications and disabilities as may be prescribed by law. The authority shall provide policy direction in the areas of money, banking, and credit. It shall have supervision over the operations of banks, and exercise such regulatory powers as may be provided by law over the operations of finance companies and other institutions performing similar functions. Until the Congress otherwise provides, the Central Bank of the Philippines, operating under existing laws, shall function as the central monetary authority. Section 21. Foreign loans may only be incurred in accordance with law, and the regulation of the monetary authority. Information on foreign loans obtained, or guaranteed by the government, shall be made available to the public. Section 22. Acts which circumvent or negate any of the provisions of this article, shall be considered inimical to the national interest, and subject to criminal and civil sanctions, as may be provided by law. Article 13. Social Justice and Human Rights. Section 1. The Congress shall give highest priority to the enactment of measures that protect and enhance the right of all the people to human dignity, reduce social, economic, and political inequalities, and remove cultural inequities, by equitably diffusing wealth and political power for the common good. To this end, the state shall regulate the acquisition, ownership, use, and disposition of property and its increments. Section 2. The promotion of social justice shall include the commitment to create economic opportunities, based on freedom of initiative and self-reliance. Labor. Section 3. The state shall afford full protection to labor, local and overseas, organized and unorganized, and promote full employment and equality of employment opportunities for all. It shall guarantee the rights of all workers to self-organization, collective bargaining and negotiations, and peaceful concerted activities, including the right to strike in accordance with law. They shall be entitled to security of tenure, humane conditions of work, and a living wage. They shall also participate in policy and decision-making processes, affecting their rights and benefits, as may be provided by law. The state shall promote the principle of shared responsibility between workers and employers, and the preferential use of voluntary modes in settling disputes, including conciliation, and shall enforce their mutual compliance therewith, to foster industrial peace. The state shall regulate the relations between workers and employers, recognizing the right of labor to its just share in the fruits of production, and the right of enterprises to reasonable returns on investments, and to expansion and growth. Agrarian and Natural Resources Reform. Section 4. The state shall, by law, undertake an agrarian reform program, founded on the right of farmers and regular farm workers, who are landless, to own directly or collectively the lands they till, or in the case of other farm workers, to receive a just share of the fruits thereof. To this end, the state shall encourage, and undertake the just distribution of all agricultural lands, subject to such priorities and reasonable retention limits, as the Congress may prescribe, taking into account ecological, developmental, or equity considerations, and subject to the payment of just compensation. In determining retention limits, the state shall respect the right of small landowners. The state shall further provide incentives, for voluntary land sharing. Section 5. The state shall recognize the right of farmers, farm workers, and landowners, as well as cooperatives, and other independent farmers' organizations to participate in the planning, organization, and management of the program, and shall provide support to agriculture, through appropriate technology and research, and adequate financial, production, marketing, and other support services. Section 6. The state shall apply the principles of agrarian reform or stewardship, whenever applicable in accordance with law, in the disposition or utilization of other natural resources, including lands of the public domain under lease or concession suitable to agriculture, subject to prior rights, homestead rights of small settlers, and the rights of indigenous communities to their ancestral lands. The state may resettle landless farmers and farm workers in its own agricultural estates, which shall be distributed to them, in the manner provided by law. Section 7. The state shall protect the rights of subsistence fishermen, especially of local communities, to the preferential use of local marine and fishing resources, both inland and offshore. It shall provide support to such fishermen, through appropriate technology and research, adequate financial, production, and marketing assistance, and other services. The state shall also protect, develop, and conserve such resources. The protection shall extend to offshore fishing grounds of subsistence fishermen. Against foreign intrusion, fish workers shall receive a just share from their labor, in the utilization of marine and fishing resources. Section 8. The state shall provide incentives to landowners to invest the proceeds of the agrarian reform program, to promote industrialization, employment creation, and privatization of public sector enterprises. Financial instruments used as payment for their lands, shall be honored as equity, in enterprises of their choice. Urban land reform and housing. Section 9. The state shall, by law, and for the common good, undertake, in cooperation with the public sector, a continuing program of urban land reform and housing, which will make available at affordable cost, decent housing and basic services, to underprivileged and homeless citizens in urban centers and resettlement areas. It shall also promote adequate employment opportunities to such citizens. In the implementation of such program, the state shall respect the rights of small property owners. Section 10. Urban or rural poor dwellers shall not be evicted, nor their dwellings demolished, except in accordance with law, and in a just and humane manner. No resettlement of urban, or rural dwellers, shall be undertaken without adequate consultation with them, and the communities where they are to be relocated. Health. Section 11. The state shall adopt an integrated and comprehensive approach to health development, which shall endeavor to make essential goods, health and other social services available to all the people, at affordable cost. There shall be priority for the needs of the underprivileged, sick, elderly, disabled, women, and children. The state shall endeavor to provide free medical care to paupers. Section 12. The state shall establish and maintain an effective food and drug regulatory system, and undertake appropriate health manpower development and research, responsive to the country's health needs and problems. Section 13. The state shall establish a special agency for disabled persons for rehabilitation, self-development, and self-reliance, and their integration into the mainstream of society. Women. Section 14. The state shall protect working women by providing safe and healthful working conditions, taking into account their maternal functions, and such facilities and opportunities that will enhance their welfare, and enable them to realize their full potential in the service of the nation. Role and rights of people's organizations. Section 15. The state shall respect the role of independent people's organizations to enable the people to pursue, and protect, within the democratic framework, their legitimate and collective interests and aspirations, through peaceful and lawful means. People's organizations are bona fide associations of citizens with demonstrated capacity to promote the public interest, and with identifiable leadership, membership, and structure. Section 16. The right of the people and their organizations to effective and reasonable participation, at all levels of social, political, and economic decision-making, shall not be abridged. The state shall, by law, facilitate the establishment of adequate consultation mechanisms. Human rights. Section 17. Number 1. There is hereby created an independent office called the Commission on Human Rights. Number 2. The Commission shall be composed of a chairman and 4 members, who must be natural-born citizens of the Philippines, and a majority of whom shall be members of the bar. The term of office and other qualifications and disabilities of the members of the Commission shall be provided by law. Number 3. Until this Commission is constituted, the existing Presidential Committee on Human Rights shall continue to exercise its present functions and powers. Number 4. The approved annual appropriations of the Commission shall be automatically and regularly released. Section 18. The Commission on Human Rights shall have the following powers and functions. Number 1. Investigate on its own, or on complaint by any party, all forms of human rights violations, involving civil and political rights. Number 2. Adopt its operational guidelines and rules of procedure, and cite for contempt for violations thereof, in accordance with the rules of court. Number 3. Provide appropriate legal measures for the protection of human rights of all persons within the Philippines, as well as Filipinos residing abroad, and provide for preventive measures and legal aid services to the underprivileged, whose human rights have been violated, or need protection. Number 4. Exercise visitorial powers over jails, prisons, or detention facilities. Number 5. Establish a continuing program of research, education, and information to enhance respect for the primacy of human rights. Number 6. Recommend to the Congress effective measures to promote human rights, and to provide for compensation to victims of violations of human rights, or their families. Number 7. Monitor the Philippine government's compliance with international treaty obligations on human rights. Number 8. Grant immunity from prosecution. To any person whose testimony, or whose possession of documents or other evidence, is necessary or convenient, to determine the truth in any investigation conducted by it, or under its authority. Number 9. Request the assistance of any department, bureau, office, or agency in the performance of its functions. Number 10. Appoint its officers and employees, in accordance with law, and Number 11. Perform such other duties and functions, as may be provided by law. Section 19. The Congress may provide for other cases of violations of human rights, that should fall within the authority of the Commission, taking into account its recommendations. Article 14. Education, science, and technology, arts, culture, and sports. Education. Section 1. The state shall protect and promote the right of all citizens to quality education at all levels, and shall take appropriate steps to make such education accessible to all. Section 2. The state shall: Number 1. Establish, maintain, and support a complete, adequate, and integrated system of education, relevant to the needs of the people and society. Number 2. Establish and maintain a system of free public education, in the elementary and high school levels. Without limiting the natural right of parents to rear their children, elementary education is compulsory for all children of school age. Number 3. Establish and maintain a system of scholarship grants, student loan programs, subsidies, and other incentives, which shall be available to deserving students, in both public and private schools, especially to the underprivileged. Number 4. Encourage non-formal, informal, and indigenous learning systems, as well as self-learning, independent, and out-of-school study programs, particularly those that respond to community needs, and Number 5. Provide adult citizens, the disabled, and out-of-school youth with training in civics, vocational efficiency, and other skills. Section 3. Number 1. All educational institutions shall include the study of the Constitution, as part of the curricula. Number 2. They shall inculcate patriotism and nationalism, foster love of humanity, respect for human rights, appreciation of the role of national heroes, in the historical development of the country, teach the rights and duties of citizenship, strengthen ethical and spiritual values, develop moral character and personal discipline, encourage critical and creative thinking, broaden scientific and technological knowledge, and promote vocational efficiency. Number 3. At the option, expressed in writing, by the parents, or guardians, religion shall be allowed to be taught to their children or wards, in public elementary and high schools within the regular class hours, by instructors designated or approved, by the religious authorities of the religion to which the children or wards belong, without additional cost to the government. Section 4. Number 1. The state recognizes the complementary roles of public and private institutions, in the educational system, and shall exercise reasonable supervision and regulation of all educational institutions. Number 2. Educational institutions, other than those established by religious groups and mission boards, shall be owned solely by citizens of the Philippines, or corporations or associations at least 60% of the capital of which is owned by such citizens. The Congress may, however, require increased Filipino equity participation, in all educational institutions. The control and administration of educational institutions shall be vested in citizens of the Philippines. No educational institution shall be established exclusively for aliens, and no group of aliens shall comprise more than 1/3 of the enrollment in any school. The provisions of this subsection shall not apply to schools established for foreign diplomatic personnel and their dependents and, unless otherwise provided by law, for other foreign temporary residents. Number 3. All revenues and assets, of non-stock, non-profit educational institutions used actually, directly, and exclusively, for educational purposes, shall be exempt from taxes and duties. Upon the dissolution or cessation of the corporate existence of such institutions, their assets shall be disposed of, in the manner provided by law. Proprietary educational institutions, including those cooperatively owned, may likewise be entitled to such exemptions, subject to the limitations provided by law, including restrictions on dividends and provisions for reinvestment. Number 4. Subject to conditions prescribed by law, all grants, endowments, donations, or contributions used actually, directly, and exclusively for educational purposes, shall be exempt from tax. Section 5. Number 1. The state shall take into account regional and sectoral needs and conditions and shall encourage local planning in the development of educational policies and programs. Number 2. Academic freedom shall be enjoyed in all institutions of higher learning. Number 3. Every citizen has a right to select a profession or course of study, subject to fair, reasonable, and equitable admission and academic requirements. Number 4. The state shall enhance the right of teachers to professional advancement. Non-teaching academic and non-academic personnel shall enjoy the protection of the state. Number 5. The state shall assign the highest budgetary priority to education, and ensure that teaching will attract and retain its rightful share of the best available talents, through adequate remuneration, and other means of job satisfaction and fulfillment. Language. Section 6. The national language of the Philippines is Filipino. As it evolves, it shall be further developed and enriched, on the basis of existing Philippine and other languages. Subject to provisions of law, and as the Congress may deem appropriate, the government shall take steps to initiate, and sustain the use of Filipino, as a medium of official communication, and as language of instruction in the educational system. Section 7. For purposes of communication and instruction, the official languages of the Philippines are, Filipino and, until otherwise provided by law, English. The regional languages are the auxiliary official languages in the regions, and shall serve as auxiliary media of instruction therein. Spanish and Arabic shall be promoted on a voluntary and optional basis. Section 8. This Constitution shall be promulgated in Filipino and English, and shall be translated into major regional languages, Arabic, and Spanish. Section 9. The Congress shall establish a National Language Commission, composed of representatives of various regions and disciplines, which shall undertake, coordinate, and promote researches, for the development, propagation, and preservation of Filipino and other languages. Science and Technology. Section 10. Science and technology are essential for national development and progress. The state shall give priority to research and development, invention, innovation, and their utilization, and to science and technology education, training, and services. It shall support indigenous, appropriate, and self-reliant scientific and technological capabilities, and their application to the country's productive systems and national life. Section 11. The Congress may provide for incentives, including tax deductions, to encourage private participation in programs of basic and applied scientific research. Scholarships, grants and aid, or other forms of incentives, shall be provided to deserving science students, researchers, scientists, inventors, technologists, and specially gifted citizens. Section 12. The state shall regulate the transfer and promote the adaptation of technology from all sources, for the national benefit. It shall encourage the widest participation of private groups, local governments, and community-based organizations, in the generation and utilization of science and technology. Section 13. The state shall protect, and secure the exclusive rights of scientists, inventors, artists, and other gifted citizens to their intellectual property and creations, particularly when beneficial to the people, for such period as may be provided by law. Arts and culture. Section 14. The state shall foster the preservation, enrichment, and dynamic evolution of a Filipino national culture, based on the principle of unity in diversity, in a climate of free artistic and intellectual expression. Section 15. Arts and letters shall enjoy the patronage of the state. The state shall conserve, promote, and popularize the nation's historical and cultural heritage, and resources, as well as artistic creations. Section 16. All the country's artistic and historic wealth constitutes the cultural treasure of the nation, and shall be under the protection of the state, which may regulate its disposition. Section 17. The state shall recognize, respect, and protect the rights of indigenous cultural communities, to preserve and develop their cultures, traditions, and institutions. It shall consider these rights, in the formulation of national plans and policies. Section 18. Number 1. The state shall ensure equal access to cultural opportunities, through the educational system, public or private cultural entities, scholarships, grants and other incentives, and community cultural centers, and other public venues. Number 2. The state shall encourage and support researches and studies on the arts and culture. Sports. Section 19. Number 1. The state shall promote physical education and encourage sports programs, league competitions, and amateur sports, including training for international competitions, to foster self-discipline, teamwork, and excellence for the development of a healthy and alert citizenry. Number 2. All educational institutions shall undertake regular sports activities, throughout the country, in cooperation with athletic clubs and other sectors. Article 15. The family. Section 1. The state recognizes the Filipino family as the foundation of the nation. Accordingly, it shall strengthen its solidarity, and actively promote its total development. Section 2. Marriage, as an inviolable social institution, is the foundation of the family, and shall be protected by the state. Section 3. The state shall defend. Number 1. The right of spouses to found a family in accordance with their religious convictions, and the demands of responsible parenthood. Number 2. The right of children to assistance, including proper care and nutrition, and special protection from all forms of neglect, abuse, cruelty, exploitation, and other conditions prejudicial to their development. Number 3. The right of the family to a family living wage and income, and Number 4. The right of families or family associations to participate in the planning and implementation of policies and programs that affect them. Section 4. The family has the duty to care for its elderly members, but the state may also do so, through just programs of Social Security.